The sun hasn't fully risen yet. Your knees ache just from standing at the window. And then you hear it, low at first, like distant thunder that doesn't stop. It grows. It shakes the glass in the frame. And when you pull back the curtain, you see dust clouds rolling down your road, and behind them, motorcycles. Dozens. Then hundreds. All of them heading straight for your house. Your wife grabs your hand and whispers, "Lord, what did we do?" And you already know the answer. Because the night before, when every single door in town was slammed shut, you opened yours. Harold Brooks held Loretta's hand at that window and said nothing. Because there were no words for what he was watching. But deep in his chest, underneath the fear, something else was there too. Something that felt like it might just be justice finally showing up, loud, rumbling, and 200 strong. Nobody in that town knew who Harold had let in the night before. Nobody knew what was really coming down that road. But by the time the engines cut and the helmets came off, an entire town would be forced to reckon with what it had done. And one small, struggling house on Callaway Road would never look the same again. The night before, a storm had moved across Greer County fast and mean. Rain coming sideways, lightning strobing the highway, the kind of weather that finds every crack in your gear. 2 motorcycles pulled off the road just outside Millhaven, a town most people only knew for the gas station on Route 9. One bike blew a belt. The other flooded out within minutes. In the rain. In the dark. Miles from anything open. The 2 men were Ryder Callaway and Boone Hatch. Ryder was in his late 50s, still, deliberate, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never had to. Boone was younger, mid-30s, tattoos up both arms, jaw always tight like he was holding something back. They had no mechanic, no motel option, phones almost dead. So they walked into town and they knocked on doors. The first house went dark the moment they stepped onto the porch. At the second, a woman cracked the door 3 inches and said, "You need to leave right now." At the third, a man answered with a shotgun already up. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. And before they'd even reached the 4th block, someone in town had posted a blurry photo of them online with the caption, "Suspicious bikers going house to house. Kids are inside. Watch out." It got 100 shares before midnight. A patrol car rolled up slow. Young officer, hand near his belt. "You fellas lost?" Not really a question. Ryder gave their names, explained the bikes, mentioned the funeral they were riding to in Beaumont. The officer ran the IDs, both clean, and let them go without offering a single thing. Just watched them walk away in the rain. Boone looked at Ryder somewhere around the 4th block. "We're outta options." Ryder didn't argue. He scanned ahead. And then he saw it, set back behind a rusted gate, nearly swallowed by oak trees, a small house with a porch light barely holding on. Paint peeling. One shutter hanging. The yard tired and patchy. But the light was on. Ryder said, "One more." And he knocked. That knock would change 4 lives forever. Before we continue this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what this elderly couple did next, most people today wouldn't dare do. Loretta answered the door. She looked at the 2 of them, the soaked leather, the size of them, the tattoos, and she was quiet for just a moment. Then she said, "You better come inside before you catch your death." Harold came around the corner, looked them over, and said, "You boys hungry?" Just like that. No interrogation. No suspicion performed for the sake of it. Just two people who had been raised to believe that a person standing in the rain deserved a warm room. They sat at the kitchen table, the one with an uneven leg Harold had shimmed with a folded matchbook years ago and never fixed. Loretta made eggs and toast and put on coffee. Ryder sat with both hands around his mug and didn't say much. Boone ate like a man who hadn't sat at a real table in a while. Harold watched them both with the quiet attention of someone who'd read people his whole life. "You boys military?" Harold asked. Ryder looked up. "How'd you know?" Harold nodded at the way Ryder held himself, straight back, still hands, eyes always finding the door. "Marines." "2 tours," Ryder said. Boone said, "Army." "1 tour." "Felt longer." Harold said, "I know that feeling." Because he did. He'd served in the early 70s, just before the drawdown. He didn't talk about it much anymore. But the photos were there on the wall. Ryder had gone very still when he first walked past those photos. Stopped in the middle of the hallway and looked at a young Harold in uniform. Something moved across his face, something Loretta caught from the kitchen doorway but didn't say anything about. Not yet. Now think about this for a moment. How many times has fear stopped you from opening your door to someone who needed help? How many times have you peeked through the curtain and decided the risk wasn't worth it? Harold and Loretta didn't have much. Their roof leaked. The back window was covered in plastic sheeting. There were unopened bills on that counter, medical bills, a county tax notice, the kind that sit there not because you've forgotten them, but because every time you pick one up, there's nothing you can do with it. And still, they opened the door. While Harold and Loretta slept, Boone slipped out to the porch. He found the toolbox just inside the door, where every old carpenter keeps it, and he started working quietly in the drizzle. Tightening screws on the railing. Replacing a rotted board with spare wood stacked against the side of the house. Harold came to check on the noise around midnight, watched him for a moment, went inside, and came back with a cup of coffee. He handed it over without a word. Boone took it. They stood there together in the dark for a while, not talking. That kind of silence means more than most conversations. And Ryder, he had seen the bills. He hadn't said anything about them. But he saw them. Around 1 a.m., Harold came back to the table. They talked the way men who've both been through things tend to talk, carefully, without showing too much at once. Harold mentioned his unit, his region, the year he served. And Ryder went very still. "You were outside Quang Tri," Ryder said. Harold looked at him. "For a stretch, yeah." Ryder set his mug down. "My brother was in that region. 1972, his squad got pinned down near a burning vehicle. He said a sergeant from another unit pulled 2 of his guys out. Never gave a name. Just went back into the field." Harold was quiet for a moment. "Was his name Cal?" "Tall kid. Red hair." Ryder's eyes went to water, just for a second. That Marine discipline caught it before it broke through. "Cal Calloway," he said. "My older brother." Harold nodded slowly. "Good man. Brave kid." "He died 2 years ago," Ryder said. "Cancer." But he talked about that day his whole life. He put his hand over Harold's on the table. He never forgot what you did. Harold shook his head. I was just doing what you do out there. And Ryder said, good men are hard to find. My brother said you were one of the best he ever met. Loretta, standing in the doorway, pressed her hand over her mouth. And Boone, outside on the porch, who had heard every word through the screen door, just stood there in the drizzle, looking at the railing he'd just fixed. Before 2 a.m., Ryder stepped outside, lit a cigarette, his only one of the night, and dialed a number. A voice picked up, low and rough. You find it? Ryder looked at the sagging roofline, the plastic on the back window, the rust-eaten gutters. Yeah, he said. It's him. His wife. The place is falling apart. A pause. How bad? Bad enough. Another pause. Tell the brothers to come. He hung up and finished the cigarette in the dark. The next morning, Darnell, Harold and Loretta's son, arrived at 7 a.m. after a sleepless night of worried texts from neighbors. He expected the worst. He found his parents at the breakfast table with two bikers, all four of them drinking coffee, his mother laughing at something Boone had just said. He pulled Ryder aside on the porch. He wasn't rude, but he was direct. I need to understand what's going on here. Ryder told him the whole story, Cal, Quang Tri, the burning vehicle, Harold. When he finished, Darnell was quiet. Then, why didn't you explain that to the neighbors? Ryder looked at him evenly. Because we don't owe strangers our story. Your father didn't ask for ours before he fed us. Darnell didn't have an answer for that. Then Ryder reached into his jacket and handed him a receipt. The county pharmacy. Harold's blood pressure medication, the one Loretta had been quietly rationing for weeks. Paid in full. 3-month supply. Anonymous. Except for the handwriting on the back, Cal would have done the same. Darnell read it twice. Folded it. Put it in his pocket. And turned away so nobody would see his face. Ryder and Boone said their goodbyes an hour later. Loretta hugged Boone, who stood there stiff-armed and patted her back like he didn't quite know what to do with his hands. Everyone laughed. Harold shook Ryder's hand and held it a moment longer than a handshake needs to be. They loaded up the bikes and rolled out toward Beaumont. The neighbors posted online, bikers finally left. A few people liked it. Nobody expected what came next. Be honest, would you have opened that door? After every neighbor in that town turned them away, after the shotgun, after the police, would you have let those two strangers in out of the rain? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if you believe kindness still matters, hit that like button. Because what happened the next morning is something that town will never forget. 50 miles out, the engines started gathering. Not 2 bikes. Not 10. Riders merging from 3 states onto the same highway, heading the same direction. A state trooper at a speed trap on Route 9 counted 60 pass him in tight formation and radioed it in. His supervisor asked where they were headed. He watched them go. Millhaven, he said. All of them. Harold was in the backyard taping the plastic back over the broken window when Loretta called him to the front. The sound was already unmistakable, low, continuous, rolling in off the highway. Then the dust clouds appeared at the far end of Callaway Road. And the bikes came over the hill. One after another, stretching back until you couldn't see where it ended. Harold took Loretta's hand. She whispered, "Lord, what did we do?" He looked out at all of them and said softly, "I think we did something right." The town noticed fast. Curtains pulled back. Someone called the police station. Cruisers arrived. The neighbors who had posted online gathered at the edges of their yards, silent. But the riders, more than 200 of them, pulled up along the road and cut their engines. One by one. Until Callaway Road was completely quiet. Helmets came off. Every single one of them standing in the morning light, looking at that small house. A large man, gray-bearded, vest covered in patches, stepped forward. "You Harold Brooks?" Harold said yes. The man nodded. "Then we're exactly where we're supposed to be." The trucks came in behind the motorcycles. Flatbeds loaded with lumber. Roofing shingles. Concrete bags. PVC pipe. Electrical wire. A portable generator. Cases of groceries. A chest freezer still in the box. And on the front seat of the lead truck, folded carefully, a brand new rocking chair. The one Loretta had mentioned offhand to Boone while they sat on the porch. She'd said her old one finally broke last spring. Boone hadn't commented. He'd just listened. Harold stood on his porch watching it all unload. His jaw was moving but nothing came out. A rider nearby said quietly, "Nobody who helped our brothers gets left behind." Here is what nobody in Millhaven knew. Ryder Callaway was the National Road Captain of the Iron Shield Brotherhood, one of the largest veteran biker organizations in the country. 17 chapters. Thousands of members. Built from men who had served, came home changed, and found in each other the thing the country had stopped giving them, loyalty without conditions. One phone call from Ryder's porch was all it took. And it wasn't just the arrival. It was what Ryder pulled from his jacket when he sat back down at Harold's kitchen table, this time with Darnell and Loretta and a dozen riders listening from the porch. A folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. He smoothed it on the table. In a dying man's handwriting, it said, "Find Harold Brooks someday. You'll know him when you find him. He'll be the one who fed you when you were cold. And when you find him, repay the debt. Every bit of it, *. Loretta put both hands over her face. Darnell turned toward the window. Harold touched the edge of that paper gently, the way you touch something that has been carried a long time, and said, he remembered. Ryder said, not for a single day did he forget. Outside, Boone, who turned out to hold a contractor's license he'd never mentioned, was running the rebuild with a clipboard and a pencil behind his ear, moving 200 men like he'd been doing it for years. Roofers on the roof. An electrician tracing the wiring. A plumber already under the house. The entire neighborhood stood in silence and watched their town do in one morning what it had failed to do for decades. The sheriff arrived around noon. He stood at the edge of the property and watched the new shingles go up, the porch railing gleaming with fresh paint, the gutters finally straight. He walked over to Ryder. Was quiet for a moment. Then, guess we judged the wrong people. Ryder looked at him without anger. You're not the first. You won't be the last. The sheriff nodded, walked back to his cruiser, and stayed parked at the end of the road for the rest of the day. Not to monitor. Just to watch. The fundraiser had gone live that morning. Ryder had set it up from his phone the night before in the dark. By lunchtime, it had passed what was needed to pay off the house completely. By sundown it had nearly doubled. A portion was quietly routed to Darnell, enough to seed the small engine repair business he'd always said he didn't have time to start. He stood in the driveway reading the deposit notification and could not speak. Inside, Loretta opened the refrigerator for the first time since they'd stocked it. She just stood there. Full shelves. Fresh food. A freezer with meat in it. She laughed, the kind of laugh that's wrapped all the way around a sob. Then she closed the door, turned around, and started making dinner for 200 people. Because that's who Loretta Brooks was. At 4 o'clock, the riders gathered in the yard. The work was done. The house looked different, not brand new, but cared for. Like someone had finally remembered it. Ryder stood in front of Harold, 200 men fanned out behind him in the long afternoon light. He was holding a leather vest patch, round, hand-stitched, the Iron Shield Brotherhood emblem, and beneath it in small letters, "Honorary Road Brother," he said, "we don't give these to riders. We give them to the people who remind us why we ride." He held it out. Harold took it. He looked at it. Then he looked up at those 200 men standing in his yard, veterans and fathers and mechanics and brothers, all of them there because one man made one phone call, and that phone call started with a knock on a door nobody else would answer. Harold said, simply, "Thank you for coming." Ryder said, "Thank you for answering the door." The next morning, the Iron Shield Brotherhood lined up before sunrise. Engines idling low, exhaust curling in the cool air. Loretta came out in her housecoat to hug Boone one last time. He stood stiff-armed again and patted her back, and the whole yard laughed, same as before. Harold walked to Ryder's bike. Extended his hand. Ryder took it. Then Harold straightened up, looked him in the eye, and gave a full salute, the first time he'd done it since his last day of service. Ryder held his gaze. And slowly, he returned it. The convoy rolled out with the sun just cresting the trees. 200 engines. One long line. Disappearing down Callaway Road. The old house stood behind Harold and Loretta, new roof, fixed porch, lights working in every room. It didn't look abandoned anymore. It looked like a home. How many good people do we push away because of fear, before we realize they were exactly the kind of people we needed? Harold and Loretta opened their door when every reason in the world said don't. And 200 men rode across state lines to show one town what real loyalty looks like. The world judged those bikers by their leather and their tattoos. But those bikers judged people by their hearts. And the door that everyone else slammed shut turned out to be the one that let in everything. What's your take on this? Comment below, I'm reading every single one. If this story resonated with you, hit the like and send it to someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more videos like this, check out the previous videos on the channel.